All right.
I need the link.
Well, it's going live now, so we're probably live on YouTube because there's always that bit of a hang. So once this red bar goes to the end, then I can give you the link because I don't have it right now.
Oh, there's a red bar. All
Yeah,
right.
there's a little loading bar that's going on here.
Loading.
And then I have to mute it because otherwise I can hear myself with a 10-second delay, and that sucks. All right. Copying it over so that you can share this out. There you
Billy
are.
Jack.
I am also going to share this on my Twitter.
All right, it's been tweeted.
Ooh.
I'm gonna start using the browser. It was ready. Phones. What is this? 2020. Maybe I'll close this now to save on my meager bandwidth. Strongly considering wiring up the house.
Yeah.
I just found out
I say
that
do it.
Cat 7 cable has come flat. So
Uh-huh.
now I'm debating, is there a way to cut it through in a very subtle manner? Probably not, but I'm gonna
Nothing
try.
is ever subtle with you, Dave, I have to say. So
Oh, where's the fun in that?
Okay, Dave, do you have anything that we need to talk about before we kind of go live? We should have done this before I pushed live, but
No,
whatever.
I
Okay.
mean, I think that this movie will will speak for itself.
What does that mean? Okay, I'm recording my end. You are recording your end?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you've checked the document here.
I can't find it. Why?
Okay, well, I don't know. That's a you problem here at this point. But I am going to be pretending to be on the phone. Okay.
All right.
This is our little improv. But this is good. This is a good movie to do, since how 25% of it is improv. This movie. So
probably more.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna start this. I just don't think that's acceptable. 2 weeks? How can I be out here for 2 weeks? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Dave, I'm on the phone with the mechanic.
What are you ordering?
I'm not ordering anything. You know that the ship has broken down and we're here on some weird asteroid in the middle of nowhere. So I'm trying to get the space mechanic to come out here and fix this. But they're being unreasonable.
You have really good service here.
Yeah, I get better service here than I get from my cell phone plan in Canada, in the middle of Calgary, Alberta. I don't know. They apparently can't send a repair person at this space time. Apparently, they can't send a repair person out at this space time of lunar year. So, I don't know. How are your roundhouse kicks? How are your roundhouse kicks, Dave?
Well, let me just
maybe you
my
can
shoes
kick
off
this into. Yeah, do that.
We'll go barefoot.
Just kick that console. Kick that console and see if that'll get it up and running.
I have been training Hapkido my whole life for this moment.
I don't believe you, Dave. All right. Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
I'm Dave.
This is a podcast where a sentient machine was forcing us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse. And then another apocalypse happened. Somehow it's used its powers to transport us across time and space. So now we're on our way back to Earth. The machine still threatens our lives if we don't review the films it asks us to, although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. And today we're going to be talking about the movie Billy Jack.
Billy Jack.
Dave, I don't want to speak for you necessarily, although I will.
Classic.
From what I remember our conversation being last week, you have no idea what this movie is, right?
No, never heard of it.
This movie, not only have I never heard of it, I'm so without words here. I might words fail me, because the more I learn about this movie that I was reading about in the past week, I'm like, how have I never heard about this movie before? It is bonkers how it got made. The storyline itself is bonkers. And there's 4 sequels. I don't get how nobody in my 30-something years of life has ever talked about this movie, or I've just never heard it spoken about.
I wonder if it's because we're Canadian. I wonder if Americans Yeah, I wonder if Americans know about this more than we would, because there's America in it.
A lot of Americana in this,
Yeah.
upholding the tenets of Americanism.
A lot of white savior action. Oh, sorry,
Yes.
half.
Right.
Half.
We have to be.
Yeah, we
have
have to
clear.
watch it later. Yeah, we'll watch it in a second.
Well, how about the? I mean, I blew past this. I should give a big thank you to Green Girl YYC and It's a Conspiracy Podcast for being our Patreon supporters. But I guess, because this is technically, not even technically, it is an independent movie made outside of the studio system, even though the studio system was basically crumbled at that point. But this was made with like Tom Laughlin's own money, with some very high profile friends. What is your history with independent cinema, Dave?
I don't know how to answer that question. What answer are you looking for?
I'm talking about your porn consumption, Dave. No, I'm there is, of course, the Hollywood blockbusters, Hollywood machine, what gets advertised to us in the broader popular culture. But then there's those smaller movies that get made, and some of them do break through to the public consciousness, but are kind of there to help support independent theaters, and are popular amongst a certain crowd, but never really are like broadly popular. And I'm wondering, like, when was it in your life that you started watching those types of movies rather than the big blockbuster Disney films? You actually went further afield.
I don't know. I guess my answer is that I have never been actively aware of what I'm watching from a production perspective.
It gets thrown in my face. I just never know what's going to happen.
Well, the first thought, other than Red Violin, that I had is probably Cube or something other, like these weird, obscure movies. But I don't remember how I came across them. I don't think I was aware of their production history. I think I just hear that they're cool, weird things at a video store that you're probably not supposed to watch, and I watch them. So I as a non-academic, I am never fully aware of what is independent. I mean, we are all aware of what is a studio film, I think, just from the promotional power behind it.
Right.
Which I will talk about is apparently kind of coming from the third version of this film.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like, this is so revolutionary, some of the stuff this guy
weird,
did.
Dude.
And I've never heard about this person in my entire life. I think really my first foray. Oh my gosh. Wow. That was a little bit of a slip of the tongue.
Here we go.
Well, my first foray also happened in the 90s. Where there was that.
It's a bit young for you, isn't it?
It would have been. I was balling at 5 years old, Dave.
Oh no. Let's not death and Venice this.
I know.
Let's be better than that.
I think it was really that huge push that came in like the late 80s, early 90s. There was like this huge independent cinema wave that happened, mostly with Sex, Lies, and Videotape. That was kind of like the first one. And then Tarantino came out like right after that. And that was a lot of independent cinema.
He's considered
Reservoir
independent?
Dogs. Yeah, Reservoir Dogs specifically was.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he did studio pick. Well, even his stuff isn't quote unquote studio pictures necessarily, but that was kind of like my first introduction to it back then. The Before series would probably be considered that too, with Richard Linklater kind of coming onto the scene.
I watched all of those, and they're good. But
they're great. Yeah, I love those movies.
That's independent. Okay. Learning, education.
Yeah. So that was kind of my first foray, because up until then it really was a diet of what was being pushed like as the top rentals at the video store. In my small town, up until a certain point, I was just watching like the big blockbusters because there was one screen available. So of course they're going to play the thing that is going to attract the most amount of people. I don't know if you know this, Dave. I haven't actually mentioned this, I don't think, on the podcast before, but my theater burnt down.
What?
When I was young. Yeah, it's really weird.
How did you live?
So I didn't have access to movies as far as theater going goes. But yeah, it was the video rental place I went to, and yeah, they were like pushing like the Pauly Shore movies, and they were like the latest Disney films and James Bond, like all that kind of stuff is really what I was consuming. And it wasn't really until I got to university that I was starting to really glom onto the more artistic side of cinema, and I got to be super pretentious for a while, and still am to a certain degree, but I was super pretentious back then.
Well, we do make this podcast. I think the same thing. I think you have to be near someone who's smarter than you to find out that these movies exist, because they weren't on TV and they weren't being pushed in a magazine or in some public media sphere. So you needed an inside source, either a video store employee or some college nerd that was studying film.
Exactly.
I can't explain how I found, Reservoir Dogs, that maybe that was big enough to break through. I think it was, I don't have any anecdotal.
Memory. It was Pulp Fiction really that broke through. Reservoir Dogs was still pretty tiny, I would say.
Oh yeah, maybe we go back to Reservoir Dogs after Pulp Fiction. It doesn't matter. But like, for example, Cube, I'm pretty sure I have to look up the launch date. Is that when I was still in high school? Who cares? But that's a weird movie, right? That's those kind of movies stick out in my mind. I have no idea how I discovered it, because that's a weird movie.
Well, I think too, it's something that I'm kind of discovering, and especially going through the year 1971. And I don't know. I don't know when this division actually happened. Some people would probably say it was Jaws. Maybe some people will say it was Star Wars, where people just really gravitated towards just the popcorn flicks and stuff like that. And there's
could be Billy Jack,
a bigger division that happened. But I mean, when we take a look at, again, 1971, some of the top grossing films are The French Connection, Fiddler on the Roof, The Last Picture Show. Like, whether you like these movies or not, these are not blockbuster films that would be made in the year 2021 that would appear in the top 10 grossing films of the year. So there seemed to be this huge division where there used to be a time where blockbuster or things that made a lot of money could also be something that you would call like artistic or I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but something that is more stimulating, more intellectual than what you might get now. And now there seems to be this huge division where it's like you're either doing a superhero or a car chase movie to throw the Fast and the Furious franchise under the bus, but
that's a pun.
There's that side of thing, or it's this like super independent $2 million budget film, which is super low for nowadays, that nobody really goes and sees, but is trying to do something more. And there seems to be like those two gulfs, and very little of that like in the middle film either. But really, it's like if someone tried to make The Godfather today, it's like you might get like a $2 million budget or $3 million budget to try and make that movie now, and it would just then go onto Netflix as like a 4-part series. You would not actually even release that into theaters probably at this point.
We'd have to be cultural historians or sociologists or ethnographers to see where I think the 70s is kind of where this polarization and maybe the rotting of culture starts, because as we learned about, for example, trailers and having to show the ending to stimulate an audience to actually pay the $25 to go see a theater. From the trailers we've been watching, that is not the case in the birth of trailers, right? I mean, this was mostly to pique interest that you might be titillated.
Right.
But now, in order for people to go, for the mass public to go and pay to see a movie, they need to be assured either that there's a happy ending or they know what they're getting into. So if it's a horror flick, they need to make sure they have enough gore. Otherwise, why spend $25 when I can get something on Netflix?
I always just love it too, where in the early 70s, so many trailers start off like from the best-selling book, or it's like from the award-winning play. I'm like, no one would say that is the first thing in a trailer nowadays. There's no way that anyone would even care about where it came from in the first place.
As far as
Well, let's do this here, Dave. Well, enough beating around the bush. I'm excited to jump into this movie that I've heard nothing about. So we're going to go thank some sponsors. And then when we return, we're going to be talking about Billy Jack.
Billy Jack. Are we doing...
Dave, yes, I forgot to warn you about this. You're doing Park Power. You're going to do Park Power.
feel like I have a very mouth today.
Yeah, you have a mushy mouth sometimes. As I do edit the show, I do have to sometimes take out that mushiness a little bit.
I don't know what to do about it.
Stop eating peanut butter before we record.
Today I'm blaming Pfizer. So.
Oh, okay. Everything's Pfizer's fault. How convenient.
Today's excuse comes to you from Pfizer.
You're inoculated. Your wife is inoculated. Do you both have to go for second shots?
We have to call later for the second shot. Helen's feeling the brutal second day symptoms right now.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
But what are you going to do?
Okay, well.
Does that bother you?
Yes.
Knowing how much work is coming?
Colin and Dave versus the Machine, of course, is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. I get to tell you about this. This episode, Dave, of Colin and Dave versus the Machine is brought to you and us and everyone by the Calgary Foundation, proudly supporting community needs for 65 years. Just about your age, I guess, Dave. Isn't that right?
That's depressing.
Yeah. When you're closer to 65 than not. So that's just a little fun fact I'm throwing out there to the
keep pushing it. Just keep pushing it. Brutal.
When you make a gift to the Calgary Foundation, it's a gift that keeps on giving. The Foundation's knowledgeable staff will provide advice on the community's most pressing needs, keeping your interests at heart and helping you give back in a way that is meaningful for you. Your contributions are invested in an endowment fund that provides a permanent source of funding, allowing you to make an impact now and forever. If you're a professional advisor creating a giving plan for a client or a donor wanting to give back to the community, discover a wealth of resources at calgaryfoundation.org to learn more, or check out Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Talking about YouTube channels, Dave, we're live on YouTube currently, and Jen is in the viewing room here sending us notes. So
notes, I love it. So a critique, like, I don't like the way that you're looking at this camera.
No. She currently is Googling just to find out more about Billy Jack. And it's like, you don't even know. Like, this is going to be a wild ride for a lot of people if you've not seen this movie before.
Jen just stepped onto the precipice of a Google hole. This guy, Tom Laughlin.
Do not Google hole, though. That is...
Well, Courtney Love was trending for a bit. I don't know why.
Maybe. Dave, what do you have for me?
Today's message from Dave. This episode is also brought to you by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider in Alberta. Offering internet, electricity, and natural gas with low rates, awesome service, and profit sharing with local charities. In Alberta, you get to choose who to buy your internet, electricity, and natural gas from. If you choose Park Power, you are choosing a positive local business. Plus, Park Power shares its profits with local not-for-profits that are working to make a difference for their communities. Shopping local is very important to Park Power's owner, Chris Kozowski, and we love, there's a break there. And we love local here at the Alberta Podcast Network, so it's a great fit. Learn more at parkpower.ca.
Nice. Again, we are not reading this off. This is just coming right from the heart. We know everything we're about to say. So
intuitive, because we believe it. We believe in it. I wonder if you'll keep that in.
We'll see. We'll see if that actually makes the episode or not. You are not getting paid for this episode, you two. We cannot, in good faith, post this.
We have just lost a sponsor. You assholes.
All right. Well, let's go back to the main episode here. Dave, I have so much to talk about with this movie. I have to say, just to steal your thunder, because normally I ask you first to tell me your thoughts on the movie. I don't think this movie is a good movie, but I almost want to say this is a great bad movie. Like, I don't know how else to term it. Like, I was never bored because I was like, I have no idea where this is going. I have literally no idea how this is going to resolve itself. And that's like, oh, now he's dancing with a snake. And oh, now there's a horse that's died in front of me because apparently in 71 we just killed animals on screen repeatedly.
Oh, we know that. Know that for a fact now. Brutal.
We're gonna watch this improv scene just go on for 15 minutes.
The first of 7. Yeah.
We're gonna push this car into the lake. I'm like, what is this movie? What is happening in this movie? But I have a lot to say. What is your first impressions of the movie Billy Jack?
I think it can be best summed up by the fact that I screen capped it. There are probably 15 pages of text we were exchanging while watching this movie.
Yeah.
It is an endless series of brutal delight. It's awful. It's an awful movie that you can't, it's like watching, it's the car crash metaphor. You can't take your eyes off it. You know you should. And you have a moral responsibility to not give this movie your attention. But it is a fascinating thing because they're trying so hard.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to behold. It has a fascinating backstory. You're going to give me so much pushback on this episode because maybe I'm giving this too much credit. But what I have to say is that what it feels like to me is that the heart of the creators is in the right place, just executed so poorly in the final product. It's like, yeah, all these things that you're bringing up is true. Yeah, I agree with so many of the things you're bringing up, but you're bringing up way too many things to try and put into one movie. Maybe ahead of your time as far as like championing rights for certain groups.
And then ultimately, just rights,
just all groups. And then ultimately, I don't really know what your message is supposed to be. I think that gets a little bit too muddled. With a main character who I have to say is maybe in this movie for, I don't know, 30 minutes of a 2-hour runtime. Like he's not really in it all that much, the character of Billy Jack.
You see his feet.
See his feet. You do see his bare feet, roundhouse kicking some punks. But this is the other part that you might push back. I find Tom Laughlin, I don't know actually say his last name.
Laughlin.
I'm gonna say Laughlin. Tom Laughlin
sounds like Laughlin.
Has so little chemistry on screen or
charisma.
He has so little charisma that for me it like loops back around to him having weird charisma where it's like I can't stop watching this guy. Like there's just something about it that there's like this black hole of charisma that somehow like draws me in by like the gravity pull of this dark star.
It's your countryness.
Maybe.
Staring off into the void, looking intently at a block of wood as you're about to chop it with your axe. That's
right.
that's what it is. I mean, is this a white man's Sweetback? It's a weird thing.
I was thinking about that hard, sort of, but I see the thing is like two independent films that we're basically talking about, like made by their creators. This is, I was thinking about that same comparison. I think that Sweetback is more pointed in its criticism. It's more focused on what it's trying to do. I just don't think it's very well made as a movie. This is kind of the exact opposite. I think that the movie it's fine. It's not like it's amazing direction or anything like that, but it feels like an actual movie at the very least to me, but with like a very scattered point that it's trying to make.
Well, I think that's why it's an apt comparison. I think that when I was watching it, I felt like the core of this is this growing sentiment we're seeing in the late 60s, early 70s, that something is fundamentally wrong with everything.
Right. Yes.
But we get two perspectives. Sweetback's the perspective of the oppressed, of someone who's broken, who's someone who's trying to speak out at a history of being the personal point of being attacked. And here we have the white savior, literally with his shoes off, kicking oppression in its face. And we get something that's reflective, let's say, of Twitter, how people phrase how to fix the world. When you're in a position of privilege, you make a movie about a guy with a shitty flat-brimmed hat who takes society like literally by himself, getting shot with his medicine bag. The fucking doesn't make any sense. And then goes to court.
I think that's one of the biggest things is that, and this is, by the way, this is a sequel to another movie that we'll get into because I watched that movie too. Dave didn't, but I watched the first movie.
I read the synopsis and I decided it was better than that.
That's probably true. It's actually a worse movie than this one in a lot of ways. But it's stated in this one. It's carried over into this, which is that he is half Native American, which Tom Holland is not. Like it's completely made up. It'd be one thing if he actually was, right? And it's like, okay, so you have a little bit of like a pedestal to stand on and talk about this stuff, but to like kind of co-opt Native Americans with a fake tribe name that doesn't actually exist in real life, it feels like very performative in this. Like, maybe you should have just had Billy Jack be a Native American then, if that is what your point is.
And this is the thing about modern cancel culture's attempt, as we've talked about before, of rewriting history. You cannot make this movie in 1971 with a First Nations person starring in it. Not only will nobody see it, it won't even get past the production stage because the cultural racism, the cultural stereotyping is already there. That's why Melvin Van Peebles had to star in his own film. I mean, nobody was going to back that thing, and nobody did. He made that, what is it, 50 grand that he scrounged up and got loans. I think that when we learned that Tom Laughlin,
I think it's Laughlin. Let's say Laughlin for the rest of the episode.
Had a break and started a Montessori. I mean, this guy is fascinating.
Geez Louise. Yeah.
A presumably successful Montessori school. So he is, in 70s terms, being as woke as he could be.
Yes,
he's trying
I agree
to
with
challenge, his whiteness, let's say. But he's also kind of like, he is Billy Jack from everything I read. He's kind of this,
strong, silent
asshole, gets into fights with people he works with. Knows the right way.
Okay, I will concede the point. I think you're right. It doesn't get made if we don't have like a white guy as the main character in this. Where I will push back, though, again, is kind of going back to like the message of this movie. And I think ultimately what it's trying to do is be this conversation between like, what do we do when we see injustice? Or do we take the pacifist route, which is what the hippies were trying to communicate back in the late 60s, early 70s? Or do we kind of have to take action? Do we have to go to the streets and be like, no, this isn't right, let's stop it? And I don't know ultimately what this movie wants me to believe on that. Where am I supposed to say, am I supposed to say, yeah, fuck pacifism? Or am I supposed to be like, no, let's like grab our guns and go and have another armed revolution?
We've seen this too, in all the movies. I think the answer is nobody knew. And I think we're we're in the midst of a civil rights movement where we have both sides being played out on the streets, right? It's not just MLK that's doing marches. You've got Malcolm X, you've got the Black Panthers, you've got all these people that are trying both routes in the middle, just trying whatever they can to get a message across. And in a weird way, this movie is kind of a great representation of that, because they have no idea what they're doing either. And it's not even like Billy Jack goes and beats everybody up and wins. He doesn't. The pacifists all lose. He actually technically loses at the end. Like one guy dies, two guys die. But even they're like, is that good? Like, is this justice? Nobody knows. So it is a fascinating exposition about the culture at the time.
I really honestly believe, had this material, I think it would still need to be reworked slightly, but had this material been brought to an experienced scriptwriter, director, I think this could have been pushed into being like, this is like a great movie, like one of the great movies of being like, or if it was tried to be remade today, I think that there is
enough meat
on the bone here to be like, yeah, like let's do this. Like this is it's trying to say something, it has action in it, and it has a message that is resonant to the times that we're living in here today.
I'll go the other way. I think that this movie needed more improv. And in fact, if the entire film, I suspect it was all improv, but might have done better.
Holy moly. So if you have not watched this movie, and you're just listening to us talk about it, which is wild. But there is a subplot in this movie that we're watching an improv class. And I'm not joking when I'm pretty sure 25% of
I think it was more,
this,
honestly.
maybe
It kept coming
30%.
Yeah.
30% of this runtime of about 2 hours is just watching an improv class. I'm like, it is such an interesting choice to be brought in. And yet, in a weird way, I find it so fascinating to watch those scenes.
And just to be clear for those, because this is not readily available anywhere, we're not talking about scripted improv.
No, like actual improv.
Like a document. Half this movie is shot as a documentary somehow, even though it's a fictional narrative. And when they do the improv, we're talking about you're in a gymnasium, they've got a camera on, and it's clear that half of them are actual teenagers. There's like two actors, and they just make up fucking weird scenes to represent the civil struggles of America at that time. So
one of them being, and I can't remember the actor's name now, but he plays Johnny Fever on WKRP in Cincinnati. So that's fun that he's in this movie. But so that group that we're seeing, it was an actual improv group called The Committee. Okay. But this gets into some deep lore. I don't know how much you know about like the evolution of improv in America, but this is one of the members of the committee in the early years was a man named Del Close. And Del Close would eventually go on to found Second City, which is like huge. Like it was in the feeder system for Saturday Night Live for like the next 2 decades sort of thing. And really came up with like the tenements of this is what good improv is. And you're actually kind of seeing his influence here in those scenes. So that's interesting. The kids are from the Other Ways School, which was like in the early 70s and late 60s, this guy named Herbert Call made this school that was kind of like separate from public schools. Of like, no. Public schools are doing this wrong. Every person is an individual. We have to teach to their strengths and standards. Made the school called The Other Ways, kind of a Montessori type of thing that so they just brought in those students. So yeah, most of these people are not actors or they're improv performers. And especially in that one scene where it's like the committee meeting where the guys are yelling back and forth, it really does feel like someone just set up a camera and watched an actual committee being yelled at and chalked down. And it's like, is this what I'm watching? For a minute, I thought it had turned into like a documentary thing that they had just brought into the movie. But I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll never know what the production process was. So, you've got Tom Laughlin with this loose idea of what Billy Jack could do to save America. And then they start shooting this film and, like, what we need? We need a school board town committee, and we need a bunch of hippie kids. They need to represent what it's like to try to fight for our rights in a democratic, forum. And we'll have 2 characters who are clearly racist, and then like a bunch of kids who are too smart for their age, and we'll just throw it at each other and see what happens. And it's
that's why like it's just such a bizarre plot, anyways. Like it starts off by this deputy's daughter running off to some weird commune. And part of it is because there's this bad guy who is going onto Native American land and stealing horses for dog meat. And that's when Billy Jack shows up, because you just have to like crow like a loon and Billy Jack appears or something. It's not really explained.
He's there to save.
He's there to save. He just like kind of walks out of the forest and he's there. And then that devolves into like them trying to shut down this school that's out there so that they can continue to like harvest these horses. Like none of this really makes any sense to me whatsoever, and I don't think it really needs to be, because ultimately it is trying to have all these commentaries about America at that time and that place. But like, what a wild way to get into this movie, watching some horses fall off a cliff.
Yeah, I mean, like we should just try to name the themes. You have native rights, there's Black power, there's animal rights, there's female civil rights. They've got alternative school learning. They've got small town America. They've got
time of corruption in politics. Like there's
rich
a
and
bunch
poor.
of
the kid that gets the brand new Corvette, and he's unable to be prosecuted by the arm of the law.
Right.
Like they tried.
Child sex trafficking is
That's
mentioned
right.
in this. Like it's like
They'd have a
so
checklist,
much.
and he's like, "We're gonna put everything in this thing. I'm gonna solve everything," and solves nothing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So let's do this. There's a lot more that I want to talk about, but I think we need to talk about some of the backstory of this movie. Billy Jack is released on May 1st, 1971. It is rated 6.3 on IMDb. It has a 50 on Metacritic. And on Rotten Tomatoes, from 16 critics, it has a 63%. And from 5,000 plus users, it has a 63% as well. So critics and audiences kind of agree. It's a bit middle of the road. It is available on DVD, and you can get it on Blu-ray as part of the Complete Billy Jack Collection, which was released in 2017. So a fairly recent release. In Canada, you cannot buy or rent it on any other of the streaming platforms. You cannot buy or rent it from like iTunes or YouTube, and it's not available to stream on any of the platforms, at least not legally. Maybe if you just peruse Daily Motion, you might find a copy of this movie, but I can't say that for sure.
The machine. We'll blame the machine.
Its budget was $800,000. It would go on to make $32.5 million, which is, because of inflation, similar to a movie making $212 million today. This was the second highest grossing film in North America in 1971. It was the highest grossing film worldwide. And I have never heard about this movie in my life. It is so bizarre to me. Its plot description from IMDb is, and I need you to listen to me carefully, because this is literally from IMDb. I'm not misspeaking. Ex-Green Beret Hapkido expert saves wild horses from being slaughtered for dog food and helps protect a desert freedom school for runaway. It doesn't actually finish the sentence. I think it means for runaway kids or runaways, but it doesn't actually say that. It just says for runaway and then stops. It stars Tom Laughlin as Billy Jack, Dolores Taylor as Jane Roberts, Bert Freed as Bernard Posner, and Julie Webb as Barbara. What do you want to say about those actors, actresses in this movie?
To be honest, I only researched Tom because it became an essay.
It did. Dolores Taylor, who is like the person who runs the school, they are married. So they are husband and wife, were married at the time of this movie, in fact. And as far as I can tell, Tom Laughlin had a bit of a film career before this, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Dolores Taylor only appeared in the Billy Jack movies. She did not act in anything else besides the Billy Jack movies. And in fact, really, Tom Laughlin really was only in Billy Jack movies from this point forward, and then never was really in anything else.
Yeah, I mean, skipping all of the pre-Billy Jack stuff, well, glancing over, I mean, I think he did study acting somehow. I don't know if you can tell. He has a credit in South Pacific.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. So yeah, that was one of his kind of first breakout performances. I don't think he had a singing part. I think he was just a supporting player.
He was dressed up as a tree in the back, a palm tree.
Right. Swaying in the breeze. By the way, too, I should mention that the girl who sings in this movie, the blonde hair girl who like really does head concert for like 2
Oh yeah, with the guitar,
is their daughter.
Oh,
so whole family affair.
So it turns out that his acting career is not doing so well. So him and Dolores decide they're going to open up a Montessori school, and apparently it does really well until it doesn't. So it says something like,
I wish I knew
is the biggest one in America,
and then they were bankrupt in 65. I want to know more. Like, I just like, wait. Something happened here. Some sort of funneling of money or something is going on. So I don't think there's a huge career for a lot of the people we just mentioned. But this movie, written by Frank Christina and Teresa Christina, directed by T.C. Frank. Those are all fake names, as is the producer, who is credited as Mary Rose Solti, because they're all Tom Laughlin. Yeah. They're just pseudonyms for him and his wife, Dolores Taylor. So he did produce, write, direct, and star in this. He's the quadruple threat, Dave. Quadruple threat.
In the Wikipedia, they call him a producer, a writer, an actor, and a director. And I'm pretty sure it's because of this movie.
Yeah.
That's great.
I don't know why they did the pseudonyms necessarily. I guess maybe they just want to have like Tom Laughlin, like in the credits.
Actually, maybe if we could do this kind of research, maybe it has to do with all this finance stuff. Maybe
Right.
his name can't be associated because he's, being chased after for tax evasion or something like that.
Maybe.
But yeah, so he apparently has been sitting on this script since like the 50s or late 50s.
Okay. Yeah. You're stepping on my stuff here, Dave. So let's do this. This is what the machine.
Right. Before you go there, then let me just throw this fun thing. He ran or put his name in to be the president of the United States of America.
3 times.
This is why I think people in America must know who he is. Even though he's a joke, they must know who Billy Jack is because this guy tried to be president. Yeah, he ran against Obama. Tried to run against Obama and GW. It's like 2008. Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, all right.
So here's the thing. I think we need to talk about Born Losers. And no, I'm not talking about us, Dave. It's actually the first film in the Billy Jack series. So this is a sequel. This is a sequel to that movie. But we should go back further and talk about Tom Laughlin in a couple more details. So he's your standard last picture show, football playing, all-American boy. Like that's really how he grew up. Goes to college playing football and then sees a production of A Streetcar Named Desire, which apparently changes his life. So he now wants to be an actor. He starts hanging around the drama department and eventually he gets to the University of South Dakota where he majors in radio acting, directing, and producing. This is also where he meets Dolores Taylor, his wife. After school, wants to break into movies, so he writes the screenplay for this movie that we're talking about in 1954. That's when he wrote the movie. I'm assuming it probably got changed a little bit when it was finally made, but he writes the movie in 1954. He is directly inspired by seeing the treatment of Native Americans in South Dakota specifically, but it doesn't seem like any studio wants to make it. But so Laughlin starts his acting career. Like you said, he's in South Pacific, a few TV episodes. The other big one he's in is Robert Altman's film, The Delinquents, which he and Altman do not get along at all. But he is in one of Robert Altman's first films. By the early 1960s, he's decided that he needs to do something more with his life rather than acting. And it's not exactly giving him a lot of money to survive on anyways. So him and Dolores start this Montessori school in Santa Monica. And like you said, 64, it's profiled. I think it's on like 60 Minutes or some news program. Like this is like the most successful Montessori school in America, and it's bankrupt a year later. So he jumps on this fad that's happening in the mid 60s where there is a lot of motorcycle exploitation films being made. I'll have to take people's word on it because the only one I kind of know of is Easy Rider, but that came out in 69. So apparently there's a lot more motorcycle movies being made. So what he does is he writes this new script featuring the Billy Jack character and does the same thing, puts pseudonyms on, but he writes, directs, produces Born Losers. So I watched this movie, Dave. You've read the synopsis. Do you remember what the synopsis told you about this movie?
Hell's Angels, raping girls.
Yes.
I don't want to watch it. Yeah.
So from my memory, this is basically how it goes. Like I said, it's not good, but it's like... Billy Jack is like living out in the forest. He's like showering nude in the waterfall, and he goes into town to buy some groceries. And while he's there, he sees this like Hell's Angels roughing up a kid, and he goes and like kicks their butts.
Shoes on or shoes off?
Shoes on, actually. So he had not been trained in Hapkido yet. That's why. We'll talk about Hapkido in a moment. So beats them up. He is bullied by them. Eventually they both go to jail, but he has to serve a longer sentence because of his retaliation instead of their initial thing, which is like bad justice system. Why are these white supremacists? Because they're Nazis, because they have like Nazi tattoos and everything. And then we follow this girl who is like part of the hippie movement on drugs. She gets captured, like you said, is raped, but they want to have a trial and have these girls not confess. They want them to
testify.
They want them to testify, but they bully them so that now the girls want to testify. Steal these girls again. Anyways, the climactic moment is him going and shooting up the neo-Nazis, and it's a big cathartic moment. It is a weird movie. It's just a really weird. It's not acted very well, as you could have told probably from this movie too. But at the very least, neo-Nazis are treated as bad people. So at least there's one thing going for it.
There's saving grace. We get to watch some neo-Nazis die.
Hey, there's bad people on both sides, Dave. There's bad people on both sides. Weirdly enough, it's a surprise huge hit. And he's supposed to follow that up with a documentary about Martin Luther King and the issues facing Black Americans. And he gets it backed by Marlon Brando, Jack Lemmon, Candice Bergen, and Robert Wise.
Speaking of Brando,
we talked about, yeah, they're friends.
Yeah, his son went to
the
Montessori school.
Yeah.
6 degrees, man. Tangled webs.
Tangled web. This is what we're finding in 71. Like, everybody knows everyone else and they all cross paths somehow.
You know what? It's the hippie thing. They're literally all in bed together, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Now, I don't know if like some of that funding then went on to help fund this movie after it fell through. I don't know. Whatever. We do know that instead he decides to cash in on the success of Born Losers. On the success of Born Losers with this sequel. There were a bunch of problems with the distributor American International Pictures, who wanted most of the political commentary cut,
and the nudity, yeah.
Yeah, that would leave the improv scenes. Like, I don't even know what that movie looks like then at this point. So
what we really liked, the improv.
Yeah, do more of the improv. So Warner, that mustachio guy is a star. We have to just go after him. Do more scenes with this guy.
A TV show. Let's get this guy. Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
So Warner Brothers steps in, says they're going to release it, and Laughlin hates how they marketed it, so he sues them, and eventually wins and re-releases it his way in 1973. So where I'm not 100% sure, where I couldn't nail it down specifically, if the box office it got was actually in 1971, or if that includes the 1973 re-release.
I suspect it's both from how I was reading some of the history. Yeah. But it's hard to tell because nobody cared at that time. Yeah. So there's no stats. No,
it still made a lot of money. Like
$32 million is insane. That's a lot of Americans that really bought into Billy Jack.
Yeah. Well, right? Apparently it was a lot of the youth going to see this. It was not like older audiences going to see this movie. Apparently, Loveland has this great quote where he says, "The youth of this country only have two heroes, Ralph Nader and Billy Jack." Which is like, I guess, sure.
What happened to MLK? What happened to your documentary, dude?
Nope, only two heroes, Ralph Nader. He gave us seatbelts, God damn it. One notable thing is that this is simultaneously happening with the Bruce Lee films coming out into America. So I think it technically by like a couple of months is the first American film that has like kung fu or martial arts inside of it, which would then become super popular throughout the 70s. So it was novel to see that sort of thing. We've told you already, it's called Hapkido. Laughlin was trained by Han Bong-soo, who is credited as at the beginning of this movie and is considered the father of modern Hapkido. So he actually trained a lot of people in this style. So he'd go on. For
people to know, that is a so-called traditional Korean martial art.
Right.
That is an offshoot with Taekwondo.
What makes it unique? Like, what is Hapkido different from?
I think, the more I learn about the history of this stuff outside of what I was told when I was a young kid from Korean people, is that because of the cultural, the colonization by Japan, Hapkido and Taekwondo seem to be derivatives of karate that were modified. And there are actually more traditional Korean martial arts. But at the end of the day, Hapkido is a type of Taekwondo that includes grappling, which you don't see in this film.
Right.
And this film, the Hapkido that's in here is basically Taekwondo. He just kicks a lot of guys in their face. And
pretty good. I have to say, as dumb as this movie is, I was like, oh, wow, he actually just drop kicked that guy. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. When he does some of the stunts and you see the camera, you're like, he actually did some. And it looks like it because some of the movements are not this beautiful balletic choreographed stuff. It actually just looks like he's trying his best to kick a dude in the stomach. So Yeah, I mean, that's something.
So it is something. Uh, not that we're going to go like super far into detail, but like he goes on, makes 2 more Billy Jack films. The third in the series, the follow up to this one, which I think is called Billy Jack Goes on Trial or Billy Jack on Trial, something like that.
Is that the fourth
The
one?
Trial of Billy
No,
Jack.
that's right. The third one is,
Yeah.
because he's just going to court at the end of this one.
That's right. Yeah. It's 3 hours long, by the
What?
way. There's no way I'm watching that movie, but it becomes also, so that movie also becomes really successful, and it changes how movies are released and marketed. So we talked about this during the Bedknobs and Broomsticks episode, but movies used to be released slowly throughout the country and then the world. So it'd start in like one city, then go to the next, and it would like have this slow rollout. So yeah, The Trial of Billy Jack was released just a few years later after this one. And instead what he did is he released it in every major city and then bought time on local news programs to advertise the movie. And so it's like, this movie's out now. And people will then flock to it. And it's essentially how every major film from then on was marketed and released. So credited to him as being the first person who did that. The only other non-Billy Jack film that he would make after 1971 was this movie called The Master Gunfighter, where he's a cowboy with a rifle, but also a samurai sword. So yes, please. I do kind of want to watch that.
Such a great trope. Yeah,
I know.
That's a big thing. You could every science fiction movie, really.
Exactly. I mean, it's basically Star Wars, really, at the end of the day. His legacy is somewhat mired in weird money issues. He had these plans to take his company, Billy Jack Enterprises, and make it another United Artists. But then a few years later, he was again millions of dollars in debt, maybe because of government causing him hardships. That's what his point of view is. Maybe he was just bad with money. Like, I don't know. I just don't know what the answer to that is. But he is one of the major pioneers of independent film. He championed new voices well into the 2000s. But because of rights issues, most of his movies aren't available on streaming, which may be reducing his legacy. That's what I would say, at least. And then, as the machine wrote out here, he also ran for president in 92, 2004, and 2008.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, he didn't get any votes, and he wasn't allowed on a podium to debate. But it is fascinating to think.
Wouldn't you like to see him try and do a roundhouse kick, though, to like Ross Perot or something like that?
Well, you know what's interesting is in this America, if he had survived into the 2020s, the America that actually brought Trump in, he might have had a shot.
Yeah. Him and Trump debating would be must-watch TV. Right there.
Yeah, that'd be gold. That'd be gold. And
then you cry for democracy while you're enjoying the telecast.
That's a thing. He did it. I don't know what else to say about it. It's shocking. And like I said, I bet Americans know more about this guy just because he's so weird.
Yeah.
He's an advocate.
What else do you want to talk about this movie?
Well, I don't know. Where
do we even start?
I know.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down in my notes. Where do we even start with this? Because there's so many directions I feel this could go. Well,
I mean, we touched basically on the thematic nature and problems of this film, which is, I mean, it's clear at the very least that Tom Laughlin is an advocate and he's trying in his mind to do the right thing on a very broad political spectrum. So he's using film as a vehicle to get people woke, really. Mm-hmm. It's not successful as a film, but it is fascinating to watch his sort of naive approach to it and kind of buy into it as you're going into it. It's such a bad movie. Like you said, I think I quit, this is like an Omega Man. It's clearly not intentionally bad, but it's hard to take your eyes away from it because I don't know, there are just these weird moments. I mean, the rich guy white faces the native kids with flour or sugar. I don't know. Yeah. It's such a weird, there's so many weird things that happen.
Well, like we only briefly mentioned, but like the snake dancing scene where it's like this again, 1971, so I understand the time, but it's like this is feeling like it's going way too much into that, like all Native Americans are these like weird spiritual, like not human things, and it's like, but you're also supporting Native rights, so like that's a kind of a weird dynamic that's in this movie. Um, what else did I write down here? Like there's the like damn your pacifism, like it feels like it's like this political statement, but then I don't feel like it's ever like followed up on. I have to call out that moment where he confronts like the rich kid who's in the bed with the 13-year-old.
Oh yeah,
which is that kind of comes out of a little bit nowhere.
Yeah.
But then he like Ric Flair chops him in the throat and kills him, and I'm like, all right, I guess that's where we are with this movie.
You know what was so weird about that is the buildup of that bad kid is that he's insecure, cowardly, and then it turns out that that he's sexually repressed too. Because like when he rapes Billy Jack's wife or the teacher, there's very weird dialogue there where he's struggling with this act and then he violently performs it. And the next time you see him, but towards the end, he's suddenly in bed with a child. Like, that's weird.
It's a weird characterization, and because I feel like at the very beginning, where his father is trying to get him to shoot horses,
right?
They shoot horses, don't they?
They try to, but Billy Jack stops them.
Well, the thing is that he can't bring himself to do it, and so for a moment, I'm like, oh, okay, this is an interesting dynamic. The kid is trying to be forced to be evil like his dad, but doesn't want to, and like, oh no, he's actually a jerk too. Okay, I guess
he's more evil. Yeah, as it turns out.
The phrase, there's part of this script that feels so modern because that daughter who's been on the commune and is now pregnant is like, I don't know how many people have balled me. I'm like, whoa, I was not expecting you to say that in that kind of frank manner, but that's what this movie does.
I think, we're stressing this so much with the end of the code, and we saw that with again Shaft, Sweetback, a little bit in French, like these gritty sort of earthy movies, this break in representation where people aren't the what do you call it, nuclear family that we've come to expect of the previous era. And so it is quite shocking that this teenage girl pouts, gets picked up by the sheriff, comes in all sulky, and then just starts mouthing off to her dad about how she's been bald and she's pregnant. I don't know how many people have been, you're just like, what the fuck is going on?
My baby's going to be black, white, or brown, or whatever she says. So
and then her dad like close fist knocks her out and dumps her body in the forest.
Yeah, and is upset that like someone saves her, or like that he wants her back, and like you literally dumped her for dead in the woods. Like I don't know what your issue is.
You know what's fascinating about that is we learn, with all the news coverage, that is not rare. Right? That act of violence is apparently quite prevalent in the world. So I don't know. Do you get points for?
I guess
being
like that's the thing.
To throw that on the screen?
I feel like this is like it's kind of like it's a 2-step forward, then 1 step back. So it's not like a full retraction. It's just like they do these good things, and it's like, oh, this is not executed well at all. Like even like this dynamic between the pacifism versus using violence. It's like, but when this happens, I go berserk. Like he hulks out and like starts. I'm like, what is happening? Yeah, I just don't think Tom Laughlin is a good enough actor to pull that statement off very well. But it's just like, I don't. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to do with this? And then the whole, because they're self-aware enough to be like, the white people don't. I forget what the exact quote is, but something like the white people don't have not the impulse, but they're not going to be the ones that save us. They're not going to be the ones who change it. It has to be the other people that force the change to happen in the world. It's like, yeah, that's great. And then it's like they use like the Black Power statement, like every white guy puts the fists up as he's being carried away. It's like he didn't really do anything. I don't understand why you're giving him like the fist. Like, yeah, man, you did it. And I'm like, and all I was there thinking, it was like, did what? Like what? He didn't do anything.
Oh, he killed that one guy by shooting him directly between the eyes with a squirt of ketchup. Well, I think this is why it makes a fascinating comparison to Sweetback, because it's the same, I don't know, problem, but it's the same thing. You know what? He's kind of speaking to what Sweetback was trying to do. If you need the oppressed people to make a statement to push back. I mean, he's literally describing the attempt of Melvin and Peebles to put their struggle out onto a screen, except he does it where he's the hero. So you get this problem with appropriation, about representation, about the white savior narrative. And that stuff is very weird. I mean, it's probably, he's self-aware enough, even though this is now viewed upon as fundamentally incorrect, to make his character half native, because I think he's aware that he can't be a John
Just
Wayne
the white
guy.
savior. Yeah.
He can't be a John Wayne guy in there and winning either. And so that's one of the main reasons I think this thing becomes so muddled. He's too self-aware.
Maybe
he keeps pulling every punch. You know, the improv, they do that Monty Python-esque scene in the park,
the street scene with the
cop. Like, what is going on?
Well, and that's the things, like, again, I think a couple of the improv people are good, but then you're doing it with a bunch of other people who I don't think are used to improv, and it's like, boy, in the right hands, this would be a hilarious scene, and it's really just not working. I don't think
that park scene, I'm pretty sure if Monty Python hadn't already done it, then they've done a better version of it. And if you pull that out of the context of this film, that scene is hilarious because it's taking a spin on who's actually in charge of those. So for those who will never watch this, they make up a scenario where someone is trying to rob an innocent victim, but then they start critiquing each other on how that one is supposed to rob and how one ought to be robbed. And then a police officer comes, and all of a sudden it becomes this quite potentially hilarious thing. Again, very Monty Python, where everybody has no idea what they're actually supposed to be doing. Why is that in this movie? It has nothing
it's a
to
good
do...
point. Like, none of the improv scenes really need to be in this movie. Like, I could see them just have a brief, like, 2 minutes, like, yes, they're in an improv scene and Billy Jack comes in, or like, we understand that this school is more than just like English classes or whatever. But then there's like, it goes on, and then another scene comes in, and then it goes on, and then the third scene, and it goes on and on. It's like, so are we, like, why is this here?
Well, what was the first one? Black Jesus, and the
then they did the driving scene with, like, they invited the parents and the school board to come out to see what they were doing. Well, then they do the street scene.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the only one that maybe could have worked in this film was having the adjudicators of the education board to, like, understand that these kids aren't having orgies, at least not in the gymnasium. And maybe you could have used that. You shouldn't. It doesn't make sense anyways. But that was only 3 of, like, 6 improv scenes in this film. Like, what? Why, Kyle? Why?
If you ever wondered what it feels like to be the friend of someone who says, "Hey, can you come and see my improv show?" It's basically this movie. It's like, okay. Here we go. I think it's important to understand what critics at the time thought. So there's a couple quotes that got pulled, or that I pulled. I'm going to stick with Roger Ebert and Pauline Kael. Both of them they were both aligned on this movie, where it's like, kind of what we're saying is, like, there's elements here that do kind of work, but ultimately it's kind of a failure of a movie. Ebert says, or he wrote, "The movie has as many causes in it as a year's run of the New Republic. There's not a single contemporary issue, from ecology to gun control, that's not covered. And toward the movie's end, you're wondering how these characters, who are just ordinary folks in a small southwestern town, managed to confront every single ethical hurdle in a few weeks of living. It's possible, I guess, but it would keep you awfully busy. And then there are always the Jews in the Soviet Union to think about, and the Pakistan refugees. I'm also somewhat disturbed by the central theme of the movie. Billy Jack seems to be saying the same thing as Born Losers, that a gun is better than a constitution in the enforcement of justice. Is democracy totally obsolete then? Is our only hope that the good fascists defeat the bad fascists? Laughlin and Taylor are still asking themselves these questions, and Billy Jack arrived at a conclusion that is only slightly more encouraging." So I don't know if you have anything to say to that statement.
I also read that, and the only thing that I was thinking is how much more apt that has become today. Because that is actually, I mean, this guy's prescient. That is what happened.
Right. Well,
We live
for
that
most
right
movies, it's like we have to be caring about other people, and we're going to solve our problems by killing other people or shooting
now.
people or
Well, it's
beating them up.
happening
Right.
right now. I mean, look at what's going on. I mean, not to overuse COVID for because too many people talk about COVID, but where's democracy? Where's common sense? Where's rationality? And where is there a form of vigilantism that's happening right now? Not just in the anti-mask movement, but smear campaigns against the opposite. The Twitter, this is not a rational discourse we've devolved into. So Billy Jack Ebert puts a great observation on it, but Billy Jack is aware of this problem that there might not be a solution. So you
Yeah.
might as well take your shoes off and kick
And,
someone in the
and
face.
kick someone in the throat.
Get
Yeah.
something for yourself. Yeah.
Uh, Pauline Kael wrote, in plot and structure, the picture is a crude, shapeless mess. But the Freedom School teachers, comedians from the committee, and some loose, good-humored children, actually Herbert Cole students from the Other Way School, give it a disarming, hip innocence. There's a sweet, naive feeling to the movie, even when it's violent and melodramatic and atrocious. And when it's good in an unorthodox, improvisatory way. This may be the first movie in which a rape victim talks about what happened to her in terms of a specific feminine anger at her violation. Dolores Taylor speaks haltingly in a sing-song monotone, as if she were working it out, and by normal dramatic standards, the scene is a drag. Yet, it stays with one. The picture has a special fairy tale appeal to very young audiences, in part because Billy Jack uses his mystical powers on behalf of the young. I thought this statement really jumped out at me because as a guy, of course, I'm not going to pick up on some of these things, but it's interesting her interpretation of that rape scene and think, no, like this is kind of what a rape victim right after the deed happens sounds like, feels like, and emotes like. And as much as, again, yeah, I don't think much of the acting is good. I think you even called this out as like, this feels like we're actually watching this actress after this actually happened to her.
Yeah, and we don't know, of course, what the actress's personal experiences are, especially because we are aware that she is not an actress.
Right.
So for her to put that moment on the screen, I mean, that's not glycerin or whatever, like eye drops in her eyes. Like she's in that moment, whether again successfully for the stage or not is irrelevant. And this is the thing about the core and impetus of this is that, again, whether it's a lived experience or just empathetic experience, there's a genuine attempt to put real issues in front of a broad audience. Mm-hmm. I'm only laughing because it is so poorly executed that it's hard. So that's a moment where, yeah, you're taken aback. I was like, oh, wow, like, is she reliving something? And then it's followed by, I don't know, a bunch of people kicking each other in the face. All of the conversation, even with the kids, even, the white face powder moment, all of it actually seems like maybe it's all anecdotal. Right. And they're just kind of bringing Billy Jack to solve what happened without resolution in people's actual experience.
That's what, honestly, that white facing scene, I don't know how else we want to term it. Like, because I know, and we have just heard that this was born out of his experience being in South Dakota. I bet you that is. He like walked in on that, or there was a newspaper report on that exact thing happening, because that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Even with the kids, and they don't know how to I mean, the kid act, I mean, it's not their fault, but the acting is so bad in that scene because they're just staring off into the void. But I'll
but at least later on, that kid does give her a St. Francis of Assisi quote, so we know he's learned, I guess.
I will say this. I mean, from my experience, I've been in many situations where I watched some. I'm not as egregious as this, blatant racism, but I suspect most people have been in a situation where they're like, I wish I had done something different to have been part of either a solution or whatever. So maybe this is what really draws audiences into movies of this nature, and maybe all like superhero movies and everything that's followed after, is this fantasy that if I only had a flat brimmed hat and no shoes, I might have been able to help those kids that were being bullied by a rich white kid in a Dairy Queen or wherever they were.
Yeah.
And
you know what I read though? I'm sorry, not read. I went down this YouTube rabbit hole of watching interviews with Tom Laughlin.
Oh no.
presumably, I don't know how much I believe this, but presumably that hat was suggested, I think, by his daughter. But then he was looking through old photos and like some Native American in the past that was really important to like a South Dakotan tribe, I think is what he said. I watched so many, they're all kind of bleeding together. And it was like he wore that exact same hat. So I knew I had to now wear that hat in the movie. I'm like, that sounds maybe kind of made up, but who knows?
Well, I will say, at least as far as characterization in photographs and paintings, that hat is depicted on Native American
Right.
certain tribes. But I am no expert. I don't think Tom Laughlin's an expert. There is a problem of cultural appropriation and representation in all of this, but this is also a 70s thing. Like I said at the beginning, if you don't do that, what is bad representation in this era? Because if you don't do this and nobody ever sees this film, then nobody ever talks about it. It's such a weird thing, right? Like it's a trap.
Well, that's the thing. And what I keep returning to is that I think it is okay to point out like, hey, this is cultural appropriation in 1971, while also simultaneously being like, but without the white person in the lead, this movie doesn't get made in 1971. You can hold both of those ideas, I think, at the same time and be like, if this were made today, then yeah, absolutely. You should be casting someone who is either Native American, or in Canada, we call them Métis if you're like half Indigenous and half white lineage. So yeah, cast someone who's more appropriate for that role.
And the only caveat to that, and I don't mean this as an argument, but you do also have to make sure that that person can perform said role.
Right. Sure.
And that's, and that's, again, there are traps there too. And I think it's just, these are just projects which are inherently problematic when you're
for sure
challenging a cultural intellectual norm. You either Billy Jacket or you tread very carefully, and either way somebody's going to be upset at it. Actually, we're becoming very defensive of this film. It is not a good movie.
No, it's not good. I don't want it to come across. I think this is a good movie. I am giving it points for trying to be something, because I think that goes a long way. I honestly, Dave, I think $1 Million Duck broke me in many ways, because now all I can think of is like, well, it's better than that movie. So I can't give it like a 1, because it's like, boy, is it way better than $1 Million Duck. And it's trying for something. It just fails at most of the things it's trying to do. I think that there are a few scenes in this that are like, no, this is actually good, well executed. I could go with this. I even like some of the improv scenes, even though they don't really belong in this movie, but at least, hey, they work. And I actually think that they are funny. But yeah, as a whole, as a movie, is it trying to say something? No, I don't think this movie succeeds. Although you're going to be mad at the rating I give it, but that'll be in a moment. Okay.
I don't know.
The machine has told us that we do have to wrap up. So I think we do need to ask this question that we ask every episode. Dave, does this hold up, and is it still culturally relevant?
I don't think so. I think that it only holds up if you love shitty movies, and like throwback films. And
sure.
Again, we talk about cinephiles. So if there are people that want to see how bad movies were made in the 70s, you're gonna love this thing because it's got every mistake.
I honestly think people should at least watch it once, just to experience the ride of being like, well, it can't possibly get any weirder than this, and then be like, nope, it got weirder.
You crawled out of a cave. It doesn't make sense. The snake dance.
The snake dance is so weird.
And then
white people can't feel through the veil, Dave, right? The veil of the mysticism. And now in Blood Brothers with the snake. Anyways, it's so fucking dumb.
the cultural relevance is a complex one too. The problem is all of these problems still exist. Yes. But the conversations have evolved enough that I don't think this movie will bring up the correct current iteration of what we're really battling anymore. So I don't think it holds up in a manner of speaking. But again, as a historian, it is fascinating how many of these movies are aware and really trying their best within their confines to let the general public know that we're not papering over this shit anymore, even though subsequently the next generations would have to, because a new code would come in.
Yeah. Well, this is why not that this is so weird for me to be saying this because it's like I'm always trying to be like, we don't need to like be doing all these remakes and like a readaptation, the blah blah blah. This is kind of a movie I would actually want to see a readaptation of. Cut out all the fat, hone it down to like one or two of the messages you want to really focus on. Have the character of Billy Jack still be there, and I think you have a movie that could actually be pretty successful in a 2021 context.
Well, this is the problem with being apologist of this film. What is the fat? Is it the fighting, right? Is it the poor acting? Is it the random scenes? Is it the improv? It's got too many nonsensical pieces that once you do that, you're just making a new movie.
Sure. Well, then call it like Willie
Jackie
Black
Billy?
or something like Jack William is what it's actually called. So I will agree that I don't think it holds up. I do think it's culturally relevant. Like you said, I think that it is still relevant to a lot of the issues that are happening today. Is it successful at the commentary? No, but I still think it is culturally relevant to what it is trying to be. This is considered a cult classic. There is a large, like a small but dedicated fan base for the Billy Jack movies that I have now discovered that is online who likes all of them. Born Losers, this one, the 2 sequels. There's actually a 5th one that was like a made-for-TV movie that I think was trying to be like a backdoor pilot to a TV series. It's wild how many movies there were that featured Billy Jack. It's like
Montessori money, man.
Montessori, more than the Shaft franchise. Like that's out. Like how many movies of this that have been made. The biggest thing that it has as far as cultural relevance right now is that Brad Pitt used the Billy Jack character as inspiration for how he played his role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So like the monotone, like not really inflecting anything in his voice.
Yeah.
So I can see it. I can actually see it when that's pointed out to you. It's like, oh yeah, I can see Tom Laughlin being kind of like a Brad Pitt sort of thing.
I'm off Tarantino, so I see. I didn't watch that.
I think it's good. I actually really like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It only works, though, if you know anything about the Manson murders. And if you don't, I really don't think that movie makes any sense. But because I do, it worked for me. That being said, as far as Billy Jack goes, that's what Dave and I thought. But what do you think? You can send any feedback to Kyle and Dave vsthemachine@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter or Instagram with the handle KDVSTM. If you want to see the entire list of films we've watched and the ratings we've given, you can go to our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/KDVSTM. And if you want to support us monetarily so that we can continue doing this podcast and not usher in the apocalypse, at least another one, you can go to our Patreon page. There's a link in the show notes of this episode. You can support for as low as $1 per month. Of course, we do not want you to donate if it in any way causes you financial hardship. Something you can do for absolutely free is to leave a rating and review on whatever app you use for podcasts. Which, by the way, we've got a bunch of new subscribers as of the recording of this episode, which is nice to hear and see.
People care.
Let's get to the rating of this movie. Dave, out of 5, what are you giving Billy Jack?
Yeah, I've been wrestling with this, but after this conversation, I can't get off this problem. You brought it up with Sunday Bloody Sunday. We've been kind of talking about this as a whole, and my scores are so low that I do kind of feel like I need to revisit all of this. The question in my mind is now, am I more apt to rewatch Sweetback, or will I actually come back and watch this? And I actually think, even though I don't want to, I would rather watch Sweetback again than ever watch this movie again. Even though they use more expensive cameras in this, and Tom Laughlin has experience producing films, so it's pieced together. I have a feeling, and we'll bring this up in a few weeks. I think that we're in the glow of how stupid this thing is because we just watched it.
Maybe
that we think it's funny. And I don't know if I'll ever think about this film again. And I can't stop thinking about Sweetback, Sunday Bloody Sunday, like all of these weird movies we watched. So I have to give it a 1 because I think it's dumb. I think it tries really hard to do the right thing. And I think it's a bit of a joke. But I did enjoy, like I said, we spent the whole night in the fiction beside each other, texting each other on the phone.
That's right. Because we do not talk to each other outside of this podcast.
No, but it's like fucking 15 pages.
Oh my God.
Of question marks.
Like, what is happening?
Is this really happening? Did he just, so that's That's something. Although, you know what? We should look at the Sweetback because I have a feeling it was the same thing. I think it was probably another 15 pages. Like, did
Right.
this really happen? They can't possibly. Oh my God, his handcuffs are still on and he's going to earn his way to freedom by having sex
Right.
with that woman. So
so this is where you're gonna hate my rating, Dave. So this is how I had to do it. So I watched Born Losers, and I don't really like the movie, but again, I gave it a little bit of extra points because it's trying to do something rather than just being absolutely abysmally awful, like a $1 Million Duck, for instance. So I gave Born Losers a 2. Okay, a 2 out of 5. This I thought was slightly better than it, which is why I landed on a 2.5.
right.
I flirted with giving it a 2 as well, but I'm like, no, there's a couple things I do enjoy about it.
I'm just going to put this there. I know you can change your letterbox score later, but you have to live with your decision. Yes. And if you can do that, looking at yourself in the mirror, and you're welcome.
To be fair, the average rating for Billy Jack on Letterboxd is a 3. So I give it less than the average that this movie gets. So I'm giving it a 2.5, which interestingly places it right above Sweetbacks then in our list. So entering our list at the number 12 position is Billy Jack. I have to say though, Dave, I'm kind of the reverse of you. I think I would rather watch Billy Jack than Sweetbacks again if I was given the choice between those two movies.
How about this? I mean, I dislike them for the opposite reasons.
Yeah.
But, you know, in terms of cultural significance, even though this movie is trying its best to tackle as many social issues as it possibly can be aware of, which one do you think holds more cultural significance between the two?
Well,
tough one, right?
It is tough. And really the only reason I know about Sweetback is because it was mentioned on a Simpsons episode, like I mentioned when we recorded that. So at least I knew of that movie. And I literally have never heard of this movie, Billy Jack, until this week. Like not a whisper of this movie have I ever heard about.
Yeah, never. Me neither. Although, you know, again, we should ask some of our, do we have American friends? I wonder if you did a poll.
Yeah, like, do you know who this is or what this is? Well, I guess we should figure out what we're going to be seeing next week, Dave. I'm going to push this button right here. Oh, well, we go from one person trying to do vigilante justice and struggling with pacifism to someone who doesn't have to struggle with pacifism because they don't know the word. We're going to watch Dirty Harry next week, Dave.
Nice. Well, you know what? Yeah, it's time to get away from being woke and just watch a dude punch a bunch of other people.
Shoot as many people as he possibly can. Yeah, that's right.
I wonder if the machine should have put Dirty Harry right after French Connection. I think that would have been a fascinating comparison. Yeah. We'll have to think about it. But let's go to Clint. Clint, don't do us wrong. Show us your big gun, Clint.
All right. Oh, God, I'm not on hold anymore. Yes? What? Another 2 weeks?
Oh, my God.
I don't know. Okay, get your shoes off, Dave. We're going to take this guy out. All right. All right. Perfect. Thanks, everyone, for watching. I don't think there's anyone watching right now currently. But Jen was in there for a bit, which was nice to see. I'm going to close all my windows.
Stop.
Oh, and then